So today's album is going to be ooh ah Positive Touch by the Undertones, right? Yeah, that's the one. Welcome to another year on Murdock's Music Minute, the channel that does album reviews, old and new, discography rankings, and all that stuff that music nerds tend to do these days on YouTube. Today, with the third album by Northern Ireland's power pop slash punk pop heroes, the Undertones. Well, everybody is talking about their famous debut album and their famous single Teenage Kicks. Fans are divided about their second album, with some saying that it is at least equally good as the debut, and others claiming that it was a big disappointment. This third album is talked about less, which clearly, for me, makes it a candidate for Yes, in this series on my channel, I'm looking at albums from usually rather well-known bands that are somehow lost between the cracks or regarded as lesser releases, maybe even disappointing releases, or that are just generally overlooked or considered albums that simply exist but are not worth mentioning in comparison to the more famous big albums by the bands in question. This one, Positive Touch, came out in 1981. As mentioned, the third release by the Undertones, recorded in the Netherlands. The band had released their second album, Hypnotized, to quite big charts success, at least in the UK, where it became the biggest selling or the best charting album of the band. But with this one, the Undertones deviated from their established sound. Positive Touch, as I will discuss in more detail a little later, sounds a lot less punk and power pop driven than the two albums before this one. Just to talk briefly about my copy of this album, this is a German pressing of a Positive Touch from the 80s, released on the EMI label, or more precisely on RDEC, which seemed to be a kind of subdivision of EMI. This is the label. Yeah. The lineup of the bands hadn't changed since their early days. What we get, however, on Positive Touch are some guest musicians, some additional musicians, and some, at least for the power pop genre, a bit more unusual instrumentation. The cover artwork is pretty interesting, especially if you've got an old vinyl version of this album. I try and make it visible on camera here. Yeah, this should work. So I always want to say that there are symbols engraved, but I think the correct term is embossed. So there are embossings or embossments here on the cover, little symbols that were meant to signify, to stand for each of the tracks on this album. A lot of those symbols, however, are quite abstract, so I never managed to find out which symbol stands for which song. But yeah, this indeed makes it an album that you like to touch. So yeah, very interesting with this embossed little figures and symbols. But then, actually, you get the legend here. For for each of the songs. Most of the songs, as always, with the Undertones, were written by guitarist John O'Neill, and as is also common with the Undertones, their songs are very short and concise, so that we get a track list of a full 14 songs on this album. And we start with Fascination, a song that is not so easy for me to decipher. Might be about sitting in a pub and meeting somebody who tells fascinating stories, but for me, or very clearly, the lyrics also refer to some sexual encounter. And this song already indicates the more, well, let's say, experimental, more diverse direction of the music on this album. The backbone of the song is a more tribal, driving rhythm, very much played on the toms, which was the in thing in the early 80s among post-punk and new wave bands. Also, the melodies are not as immediate maybe as on the first two albums by the Undertones, showing the will to do something a bit less obvious in the music maybe, and to, well, mature a little bit in sound. We also get already on Fascination, but also on other tracks, a lot more piano and sometimes keyboards, so all the things that you would probably expect from a rock band in the early 80s. One shouldn't forget that since the late 70s, when the Undertones started and everybody was into punk rock, the musical taste and landscape had already changed again considerably. I've already mentioned post-punk and new wave. So in 1981, also the mod revival had happened. New pop was emerging. Bands were trying to get away from the established, or what they maybe even referred to as reactionary dogma of guitars in a rock band. There were a lot of soul influences and reggae and ska influences to be found among the newer bands. And of course, also synth pop was slowly rising. The next song, Julie Ocean, starts with almost abrasive, very loose, almost sloppy strumming, quite an odd melody or tune, but it still manages to become a very short but intriguing, well, let's say indie pop or guitar pop song. It's a lot more laid back than most of the Undertones material up to that point. Again, there is tinkling, also almost random sounding piano in the background, so the band deliberately tried to work more with production, with arrangements, and give their power pop tunes a bit of an maybe more artsy spin. Also, the lyrics, for example, on Julie Ocean, but also in a lot of other tracks on Positive Touch, are much more abstract or less direct and more obscure than the more teenage angst songs from the first two albums. Life's Too Easy, written by John O'Neill, second guitarist Damien O'Neill, and bass player Michael Bradley, is a swinging post-punk or new wave song with a bit of a dark undertone also in the music. Again, there is an almost chaotic, random tinkling piano in the background, and a spiky, a little bit atonal guitar line. This song, by some reviewers or critics, has been identified as alluding to the Troubles, the armed conflict in Northern Ireland. But again, the lyrics are very indirect.
Stop complaining about your life's too easy. Stop complaining about your life's too easy. Suddenly my girlfriend started screaming. I knew this had never happened before. Stop complaining about your life's too easy. Stop complaining about your life's too easy.
Crisis of Mine is a quirky indie pop new wave number, a bit more straightforward than the two tracks before this one, but also definitely different from the more in-your-face undertones of the first two albums. This one seems to ask, well, questions of adolescence growing up, but from a already more matured point of view than the more teenage topics on Hypnotized and the debut album. There's also a little break with organ and harmony vocals that seems to be influenced a little bit more by 60s music. The Undertones or band members stated when this album came out that they had been listening to quite a lot of mid-60s and late 60s garage rock when writing the material for this album. An influence I don't necessarily hear a lot of times in the material on Positive Touch, but this little break clearly shows that the band knew their 60s pop groups. You're Welcome maybe taps a little bit more into that teenage mindset. Sad girl always sitting in her room, such an unusual attraction. This could be considered the pop ballad of the album. It's one of the more tuneful or more instantly tuneful tracks, but at the same time there's also something a bit pensive, thoughtful about the way this is played and arranged. There's a very lofty, slightly psychedelic break, and in the end we also get a kind of late night bar saxophone added to the arrangement, also something we wouldn't have heard on the early Undertones albums. His Good Looking Girlfriend is one of the catchiest tracks on the album. This clearly is the Undertones doing their power pop, but in, again, a more sophisticated, a little bit more artsy way. A very cheeky song about, somebody having a very good-looking girlfriend, and all of a sudden friends want to meet him all the time. They are going out to parties. He wonders why, and the answer is everybody simply wants to see his good-looking girlfriend. There's also a bit of a brass section in the background at times in this song, indicating that the Undertones were also looking for a bit of a more soul-influenced sound. Apparently they had also been listening to bands like Dexys Midnight Runners, who had just arrived newly on the scene in the early 80s and who were massively popular in the UK. So also that whole musical movement is a little bit reflected in some of the songs.
He thinks he's got all the strength, but really he's got none. Everybody wants to know his good-looking girlfriend. Everybody wants to know his good-looking girlfriend.
Side 1 ends with the title track, The Positive Touch, which sounds like a fun song with a light-footed, steady groove and, surprisingly, a little bit of slide guitar. Great melody, I like it a lot. Maybe the subject matter, which is manic depression or mental illness in general, kept it from being chosen as another single, because on the strength of the tune, at least personally, I would have chosen this as another single of the album. It's a highlight for me. But even here, the band tries to add something different, something new to the songwriting. There's a middle part with marimba in this song to keep it from being too maybe too direct, too one-dimensional power pop, and that certainly makes it quite intriguing.
What you thought was strange was fascination. Yesterday it rained all day long. She can't slow down manic depression. It takes a positive touch. It takes a positive touch.
Side 2's When Saturday Comes opens with a lot of minor chords on the electric guitar. There is a brooding, a bit dramatic organ, and overall this song has something very melancholic, or I would rather say melodramatic about it, and something a little bit dark. Fergal Sharkey's voice is very suited for that, and in this respect the song stands out a bit from the other ones. Next up is the album's single, It's Going to Happen. Interestingly, not written by John O'Neill, but by his brother and, again, bassist Michael Bradley. This is the most obviously soul-influenced song. It's got a very easygoing rhythm, lots of brass, a great brass section in this song, and it is an undeniably catchy pop song if it wasn't for the subject matter. And despite its breezy, danceable, easygoing style, which is not unlike something the Jam might have done in their later years, or the aforementioned Dexys Midnight Runners, the undertones really get political here, however, again, in a very hidden way in the lyrics. Apparently, this song was influenced by hunger strikes of prisoners in Northern Ireland, but it's really hard to decipher from the lyrics. In general, the song speaks about things that will happen again and again unless people change their minds or, well, stand up against them in a more general way. And it seems almost ironic that this most pop-sounding track is maybe one of the most politically influenced songs on the album. Nonetheless, it's a great song, a very good single, reached number 18 in the UK, and maybe not surprisingly, the top 10 in Ireland.
Happens all the time. It's gonna happen, happen till you change your mind. It's gonna happen, happen, happens all the time. It's gonna happen, happen till you change your mind. Best story I've ever heard.
Sigh and Explode keeps things interesting on the album. It has a jazzy undertone. It's a jazzy, a bit odd little, well, new wave pop number. Fergal Sharkey here sings in a very gentle way. It's a song about emotional pressure or inner turmoil, maybe. Then the band adds a funny honky-tonk piano to the arrangement, and overall this is a track that reminds me of the a little bit odd, quirky little transitional numbers you find on Blur albums, such as the mid-90s Blur albums Parklife or The Great Escape. So this kind of style certainly also later on influenced indie pop and Britpop bands. I Don't Know is a solid power pop number that almost seems to make a bit fun of those She Left Me heartbreak songs. The lyrical eye receives a postcard from Mallorca, or from Spain. She doesn't want to come back, but he goes to, I don't know, the club, a discotheque, though he doesn't really feel like partying, but he still does. Yeah, it's a fun song. And so is also the next one, Hannah Dude. More up-tempo, maybe the one that sounds the most like former Undertones. It's more kind of a punky power pop track. very short, very sharply played, and yeah, immediately catchy in its simplicity. Nonetheless, the band sneaks in recorders and even a rhythm change in the break, in the middle part. If you haven't heard this one before by the Undertones, I think also fans of their more immediate punk pop tracks from the debut will like Hannah Dude. Could also have been a single, in my opinion, and it's another one that I think is a good reason to seek out this record.
Let's sit down and talk about your life, Hannah, and tell me about the tears that are in your eyes, Hannah. She's crying, I'm trying not to feel so sad.
Boy Wonder continues in this more old school Undertones style. Maybe it's the most or the least sophisticated track. One might even call this a bit of filler, even though I still find it quite memorable. It's an observational lyric about, yeah, a person, a boy who doesn't want to grow up and who sort of enjoys his role as the boy wonder in the streets and the one all the smaller kids look up to, but who's ultimately somebody who is maybe afraid of real life, of life as a grown-up, or maybe also doesn't have the capacities to really lead the life of a grown-up. The album ends on an interesting note with Forever Paradise, the most atmospheric track I've heard by the Undertones, at least on the first 3 albums. It has a dreamy piano line and kind of also lush surf guitar make this a new wave informed surf pop song, but not in the style of maybe the Beach Boys, but in a lot more in a hazier, a little bit psychedelic way. Also, the lyrics are a little bit mystifying. It's a kind of strange, as mentioned, hazy love song, including very psychedelic sounds in the end. And it's a perfect way to end an album, because this song sounds like lulling you into a dreamland, you know, stepping over the border between being awake and falling asleep. So that's the music on The Positive Touch by the Undertones from 1981. It reached number 17 in the UK charts, so not a complete failure. But yeah, as mentioned, I have a bit of a feeling that this is the one, the unheralded, or the, at least nowadays, ignored, overlooked album by the Undertones. It certainly hasn't got the immediate punch of their first 2 albums, and some of the arrangement decisions sound like, let's do something different just for the sake of having something different in our sound. But that doesn't take away from this being a very interesting, well, new wave indie pop album with a few unusual twists in the usually rather one-dimensional power pop formula. So yeah, even though Positive Touch won't become my very favorite Undertones album, it baffles me a little bit that this one is so seldomly mentioned. And because I think not only is this worth maybe re-evaluating or rediscovering for Undertones fans, but if you are interested in new wave 80s power pop or generally maybe the roots of indie pop, this could be a compelling album. Let me know your opinion of Positive Touch, or maybe also of the Undertones in general, in the comments. Thanks for watching. Let's see what other albums slipped under the radar that I will unearth again here on the channel. Until then, thanks for watching and see you for the next Murdock Music Minute.